Tired Metalhead Weatherman. I hope you guys have had a good weekend so far. Still got one more day to go, given the fact that we got a holiday weekend on our hands. So, as promised, I was gonna do a 4th of July forecast, and we are gonna do that. But we're also gonna go over the ongoing severe weather. Just briefly gonna touch on it. It's gonna be a relatively short video. Right now, though, we're gonna take a quick look at the watches and warnings. I don't know why I didn't have the screen up, but that's on me. Alright, this thing will stop acting wonky. We've only had severe thunderstorms today. No tornado reports so far. Let's hope it stays that way. But anyway, we have ongoing severe weather and an elevated wind threat from Montana into the Dakotas. And we also have some severe weather possible in central Nebraska, even towards northern Kansas. So earlier today, this got upgraded to an enhanced risk. Storms didn't really start popping up until relatively recently. We got about 50 wind reports so far and 25 hail reports. Let's get a little more in depth though, shall we? Alright, so here's our enhanced risk. Mainly around North Dakota and Montana. No major cities on this map are being shown, but there are some areas that could be at risk here. We have Dickinson, North Dakota, Miles City, Montana, Glendive, and Sydney. You guys might want to be on the lookout for some damaging winds tonight. And for the slight risk, we do have some more common cities. We have Bismarck and Glasgow, Billings. You guys are in play. And of course, throughout all of South Dakota and parts of central Nebraska, you guys are in play for some severe weather. Look at the tornado threat. We do have like a 5% region just to the east of Billings, but I don't really think there's a great chance of that populating in anything significant. Wind threat, of course, as I mentioned, was the greatest threat, but there is a hatched risk area beyond our enhanced risk that stretches all the way into northern Nebraska. So that's going to have to be watched as we continue to see these storms roll through. Our hail threat is a little bit lower, but we do have a significant parameter as well. This reaches into the Dakotas and, of course, into Montana. Then, of course, we have a cheeky little 15% area here, right on the Kansas-Nebraska border towards the Corn Belt. A major city to include in that would be somewhere like McCook. But we are just about really towards the end of this threat. About another 2 or 3 hours, these storms, I expect them to start to lose a lot of steam, and we will be moving on to tomorrow's threat. So this is our 4th of July forecast, really starting now. And once again, we have 2 slight risk areas now. This first storm system is most likely going to come in as an MCS and then maybe set up a boundary where more storms can form later around Great Lakes region towards Lake Michigan, and we could even have areas like Chicago and Peoria in play for some severe weather. And then of course we have Milwaukee and Madison in play, as well as La Crosse. We could have some very damaging storms, and we can't rule out parts of Iowa and parts of Minnesota as well, especially southern or southeastern Minnesota. And then our secondary slight risk, of course, is right around the same area that we had the storms today. North Dakota, parts of North Dakota and South Dakota, but the main threat looks to be more towards Montana over here. Let's look at the parameters. Hail threat, nothing surprising there. Right where our slight risk areas have been outlined is where our slight risk for hail exists, and our marginal is in the brown. And the same can be said for our wind threat. Get to the tornado threat. It's a little bit more interesting as we get out towards the Chicago threat. I'm gonna look more into the parameters of this one. I'll be more intricate with that, but I'm almost certain there's gonna be a pretty substantial wind threat. Hail threats likely, but I think the wind threat's definitely going to be the main story here. And we'll go right into everything else here as well. We're going to go to the temperatures first. Try to cover the basis for everybody. It's not going to be anything surprising here. It's going to be hot. I mean, this isn't new. This isn't really news, to be honest. We'll start with the southeast. We'll start with the eastern half of the country, honestly. Now, even right now, you can kind of see that it's still pretty toasty out here. Unless you're towards Long Island and any areas beyond, any areas further north of that, you're not even going to, most likely, you aren't even going to drop below 70 for a low tonight. Anywhere past the Four Corners region, some of you guys might not be lucky, might be lucky to get below 80 tonight, especially as you go towards areas like Texas and Oklahoma. And the humidity, of course, is going to be ridiculous as well, given the time of year. So just be prepared. Maybe have some water on the side of your bed, or something to drink, something to keep you hydrated, or just make sure you're comfortable. So we start to push into the early morning and afternoon hours. And of course the heat snaps on immediately, like the switches are getting flipped. And a lot of areas around the eastern half of the country are going to be getting into the mid to upper 80s. Some areas getting into 90s. Well, once we get towards Texas and Oklahoma, even into Kansas and Nebraska, we could see some triple digits. So it's going to be very hot during the day and into the late afternoon hours. Storm threat is going to be prevalent around these two regions. It'll kind of bring the temperatures down, but we'll still have to watch it. It's very dependent on how these storms develop, but even before they develop, it's still going to be pretty warm for you guys too. Unless you're directly up against Lake Michigan, it's going to be pretty rough. It's still going to be into the upper 80s with the increased humidity. And the same can be said for around parts of North and South Dakota. We move this along and we get towards the late evening and starting to push into the overnight hours. We still have mid to upper 90s around this region, around the Midwestern regions towards the Corn Belt. And I almost forgot to cover you guys over here in the west. Towards the Four Corners region, things aren't quite as bad. It's a little bit more comfortable over here. We do have that monsoonal flow, so there are going to be some pop-up storms, especially around our Four Corners region. So I have to watch out for that. So we move this along here. Temperatures do really start to rise. These warm temperatures do really start to make their way pretty far north, even into the mountainous regions. We're getting into the 70s and 80s, towards the higher elevations even. Unless you're getting towards areas like northern Idaho and parts of Washington, because Oregon, you guys aren't even exempt from getting into the 70s and 80s. Move this along, and once we get towards the overnight hours, we start to cool down just in time. Just enough to where we get below the 70s and 80s around the eastern half of the country. And then once we get towards the morning hours, we're going back to work. That's when we start to heat right back up like we're in a toaster oven. And this heat pushes just further and further north. So no one's exempt. So the main thing to gather from the temperature map is no one's exempt from the heat. And no one... And for the most part, a lot of people could be in line for some pop-up storms. Of course, we have the severe weather areas that we spoke about earlier. We'll just go from that point. Take a look at who has a high likelihood of precip. Waiting for this map to load. We'll go over the severe weather parameters after this, and we should be pretty close to done after that. All right. So we can see here that we do have some pop-up thunderstorms around the south and east. Severe weather events going on around the northern plains of the country. And of course, like I said, here's a monsoonal flow type setup here around the Four Corners, causing some disturbed weather. Move this along. These storms die off in the southeast, go out to sea, and here's our MCS that I was talking about developing as these storms progress into the overnight hours around the Central Plains, North Central Plains. This will work its way around towards towards the Lake Michigan region, and this is where our next severe setup will exist. This kind of has an interesting look, like there could be some embedded supercells with it. Meanwhile, we're watching towards the southeast. We have our Gulf of Mexico moisture flow working its way in with those warm temperatures involved as well. It's not going to take much to get some pop-up storms, so you'll have to be watching out for that as you're barbecuing. And then, of course, here's our little low pressure feature here. It's creating that monsoonal flow around the four corners. And of course, in Montana, we have another upper level low that's almost kind of breaking the cap off, so to speak, and allowing for more severe weather to be possible around the Dakotas and Montana. This will last. So now we're into Tuesday, back into the work day, and looks like there will be another severe weather day. We may go over it tomorrow if things continue to escalate with that. There has been rumblings of potentially there being another big storm system on the way. I'll look into that and I'll give you more details on that in the next video. Most likely it will be tomorrow. Now, let's go and look at the CAPE values for our severe weather regions especially, but we'll go ahead and just look everywhere in particular, just to see who has a good chance of getting some thunderstorms. So we're going into the afternoon hours. Of course, our CAPE values are going to be highest in our severe weather region, especially South Dakota. South Dakota has some really high values, but there are some pretty impressive values as we get towards Illinois and pushing towards Wisconsin. We do have values that are kind of pushing that 3,000 plus mark. So it's a relatively ripe environment for severe storms. Move this along up towards the south and down towards the south and east. We do have some decent values. We're hitting that 1,500 mark. So any storms that pop up in this environment could be impressive. I wouldn't rule out a severe thunderstorm warning possible. It's a slim chance, but there's one there nonetheless. Got some pretty big CAPE values for Tuesday afternoon as well. Getting a little ahead of myself here, but we'll have to watch the Ohio Valley for that. And it even stretches back pretty far too. We'll keep a close eye on that. We'll look at the surface-based CAPE next. Kind of try to see if we can hone in on any sort of tornadic threat. Considering the fact that there's a 2% chance, I mean, you have to cross your T's and dot your I's, of course. So our surface-based CAPE is going to look a little different because we were looking at the mixed layer CAPE. They are definitely two different things, and you got to treat them as such, because surface-based CAPE is what you would look for when it comes to potential tornadic activity more so than mixed layer CAPE. Mixed layer tends to lean towards more of the damaging wind threat. So our surface CAPE isn't super impressive until later in the day, and this looks incredibly elevated as we get towards this region of eastern Iowa and around parts of western Illinois, and maybe even this little corner here of Wisconsin. I'll have to watch that as we get into the evening hours. This doesn't seem like it hangs around for too long, but I do think that there is a chance that maybe there could be a small tornado threat. I mean, like I said, it's marginal risk. Would it surprise me if we get an upgrade to a 5%? Not really. I mean, we'll take a look at the low-level jet too, just to make sure we got everything covered here. But I'm not sure. I'm kind of thinking yes, though, to be honest, because I did remember, and if you are a weather geek, you should follow Reed Timmer, of course. I remember Reed Timmer talking about a wind maximum being set up somewhere around here. We're gonna try and go ahead and take a quick look at that before we finish out the video. Trying to get into that right time range here, and oh, okay, and there it is right there. It's not the strongest wind maximum I've seen, but we are hitting that 40, 45 knot mark, which is what you would be looking for potential tornadic activity. And it does kind of coincide with the increased surface cape around here. So there is a point here where we could be watching for a couple of tornadoes. Will they be anything significant? Time will only tell. And if you remember earlier this year, there was a tornado emergency issued for Jonesboro, and that was a marginal risk. So that just goes to show you anything can happen. So if you happen to be in a severe weather threat for tomorrow, if you're barbecuing, just keep an eye on the weather, keep an eye on the clouds. And if conditions are changing, just be prepared to act. I'm not saying that you're bound to get hit by something nasty, but you never want to get caught slipping. That's the main thing. This is about all I have for you guys tonight. Just going to move this a little bit further forward. Might have to watch the Ohio Valley tomorrow for potential severe weather, maybe even tornadic activity. But yeah, anyway, this is all I got for you guys. If you like what I did with this video there, drop me a like. We'll greatly appreciate it. Leave a comment too. Tell me how I'm doing. Tell me how I can improve. And share the channel, of course, as well. Excuse me. But until the next video, which will most likely be tomorrow, this has been Tired Metalhead Weatherman. You guys have a good night.